So good afternoon, Vanakkam. We have a very interesting session now, and I hope people who are online, offline benefit from this. We have two eminent minds here. I will start with Dr. Jagadesh Kumar. The title of the session is Doers and Dreamers. I think that it's not a mutually exclusive situation. You can be a dreamer and then do what you dream. Or you can be the other way around also, so there is no distinction. But my question is a little, let me expand on this. Does the higher education system equip the youth of today? We have the youngest demography, median age of 28, 29. In some states, it's still under 25. Where we are, it is probably towards the 30s. So, are we equipping those who come out of this college, who enter the stream, in whatever stream? I'm not saying necessarily STEM or liberal arts or anything. I'm saying, are we equipping them to be able to both dream and do? How well are they equipped?
So, your question has two indirect questions. One, it indicates that maybe sufficient work is not done in higher education, in our educational system, to enable our doers and dreamers. The other one is that, how can we do that? Now, let me give you a small historical snippet here. Nearly 200 years ago, the governor of Madras Residency, Thomas Munro, he wanted to know the state of education in Madras Residency. So he conducted a survey from 1822 to 25. And when they looked at the survey results, they were surprised to see that Madras Residency had many schools, and it was educating almost 160,000 students. And then there were 1,000 colleges educating nearly 6,000 students. If we want to enable our doers and dreamers, we need to learn lessons from there. To their surprise, the British officials found that this education system that was there in the Madras Residency, it was socially inclusive. There were students coming from every economic and social strata of this society. And the education was accessible. It was of high quality. You know, we talk about Tirukural. Tirukural, there is one full chapter devoted to education. And Kural 391, it talks about learn everything that you need to learn and make it part of your life. So when we are educating our students, we need to ensure that the knowledge that they are acquiring is just for knowledge's sake, or is it a tool for their life? Now, if you look at again the Madras Residency, the schooling system and college system, what were they teaching? They were teaching the commercial mathematics. They were focusing on foundational literacy and numeracy. Again, Tirukural says, the letters and numbers are eyes of human beings. Such was the importance given.
Not a great eloquence to be able to relate it to the human body.
So they were teaching, for example, water management, agriculture, textiles, so that students, what they learn, they actually use it in their life. What has happened after we adopted the British kind of education system, we abandoned the best practices that were there in our educational system, which was experiential learning, which was multidisciplinary education. For example, in the same governor's report, they found that the education that was provided to our students was at system level, textiles, metallurgy, or medicine, so that the students had to be good in multiple disciplines to succeed in system level of thinking. So what is missing today in our education is this multidisciplinarity and the flexibility and the freedom that is required for our students to think out of the box. You know, in those days, 200 years ago, in Madras residency, the education system is aligned to the seasonal cycles, to the work cycles of the students, so that they can exit and enter. Today we are talking about in NEP, exit and entry, but 200 years ago, in the education system, in Madras residency, there was multiple entry and exit system. So the point I am trying to say is that today, if our students have to contribute to the societal growth, they must have experiential learning. They must focus on not only gaining domain knowledge, but they should also have a bigger picture of how this domain knowledge is going to interact with the other areas of life. So this is what is missing, and that's the reason why in the national education policy, we emphasize on introducing some of these elements so that our students will become, they are enabled as dreamers and doers.
Okay, so I'll take this forward. So Girija, now we will address this from a practical policy perspective with your decades in government. So the charge earlier was that post-Macaulay world India sort of created, was taken into this whole idea of assembly line production of students or skilled people to serve the industrial revolution of the West, and that, the core that we had here was taken away or whatever. Now, some corrective steps have been taken, some corrective steps are not done. One major issue that has been there in the first national education policy, second national education policy, and in my book, in the third book, Gated Republic, there is a whole chapter on what happened from where on education. And we see that the amount of money that has to be spent on education has never actually reached what MC Chagla wanted or what Kothari wanted, and what even Mr. Vajpayee wanted when Right to Education came in, and now again. Now, there is a fundamental issue of funding, then there is a fundamental issue of the curriculum and syllabus and just approach. Now, you've been head of a large government like Tamil Nadu government. Do these people who come into government, which is a services sector, who enter the service either in IAS or other services or allied services, do you see them communicative? Do you see them equipped to serve the people? Because it's a service sector thing at the end of the day.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's a great pleasure to be here. I mean, just the energy of the crowd is very, what shall I say, it's contagious. So the question is, you're talking about people who enter into government. Now, that's a very, I'm not even talking civil service, because civil service is now become like something which people do time and again. I'm really not even competent to talk about that. Also, I must mention to the audience, I am 7 years out of government. Because I've now worn the non-government, not-for-profit hat for 7 years. So what I'm talking about is a little dated from my point of view. So I think that this dreamers and doers is very appropriate. And today's generation, what we call as next generation, or you want to call it Gen Z or whatever, and that's the crowd here. This is not the crowd that definitely my generation was. I was just telling him, my generation, the one that was born in the 50s, was actually like a gap generation. We neither had the fervor of the independence and what my parents' generation had, nor do we have what is there today. Today's generation is so connected. I mean, yesterday we had I was in another meeting where a young person was asked to say, what do you think about Gen Z? And they said, there are 3 characteristics. We are all screen addicted. We are all we are very individual. That is, we don't need the crowd which is immediately around us. We have a community which is available to us virtually, and we are bombarded with information. So my context today is a little different. I'm happy with what Professor Jagadesh Kumar is saying, that yes, we had such a culture and such a education system, and we have lost a bit of it. But today our education system, whether they come into government or they are going to be in society, is a product of this Gen Z. And it's a good thing. It is not all a bad thing. I'm the last person. I'm also talking from another viewpoint. I now have a granddaughter in class 12. So I'm talking from a Gen Z grandmother perspective. So their whole worldview is shaped by this information flow that comes. What this higher education system now has to do is not only, as he did, be more flexible, be more inclusive. The other thing they have to do is somehow teach them to be self-regulatory and how to differentiate between the useful and not useful information that is coming to them. And this was not there even 5 years earlier. And I won't even go to AI, because then we'll have another meeting on that subject and you will be more than half an hour late. I'm saying even with the amount of information that's coming to us on social media, YouTube, etc., and a generation that is curious to learn and which has access, I'm sort of deviated from your subject. I think we are dealing with a different problem or a different opportunity, whichever way you want to look at it. And I think one of the things I see for the higher education system is, how are we going to use this to actually push these children up and out of and to become dreamers and doers.
So basically, how do we get them out of their comfort zones or entitlement zones, whichever way you want to sort of place this? And are they equipped to sort of Now, one question that extends to what the model approach to education now, what Girija said is interesting, because you said the entry and exit, whether you allow it or not, the Gen Z is going to enter and exit, and there's nothing we can do about it. So now Gen Z and others are also sort of part-time believers or full-time believers that attending the class and going to college and all, it's a waste of time. I mean, we can learn everything on YouTube. And YouTube has a lot to teach.
Right.
This is the thing. So I wanted your perspective, on this aspect of how does the UGC or the Government of India, how does the NEP deal with this kind of aspect? And the second thing is that, is there space for YouTube to be inducted into the mainstream?
So,
when I say YouTube, I mean all kinds of digital
education platforms.
You see, there are 3 spheres which are very rapidly changing. One is the knowledge sphere. There is enormous information, but the challenge for us is, how do you convert this information into knowledge so that it can guide us in our action and judgment? And that ability comes in the students only when they develop the ability to question, to critically think, analyze, and explain. The second sphere where rapid changes are happening is the workplace. All routine works are going to be automated, and our young people have to now focus on higher order skills, such as judgment, creativity, domain knowledge, ethical reasoning, ability to work in teams. Right? Ethical reasoning has become all the more important today. Again, going back to Tirukural, Kural 400 says that the ultimate objective of education is to lead an ethical living. Right? So, domain knowledge also is important. Today, in the newspapers, there is a headline how a lower court used ChatGPT to generate an order which embedded some fictitious Supreme Court judgments which were not there at all. But unless you have domain knowledge, you can't really make out whether the AI tools are guiding you in the correct direction or not. And the third area, which is rapidly changing, is the power. Today, only those countries which have control over computing, data, and models, they will shape the markets, they will shape the society and culture. Therefore, we have to think about whether we are providing enabling instruments in our higher education so that our students develop ability in these three spheres. Now, when we look at various reforms that we are bringing as part of the NEP 2020, these things are already happening. Basically, what we need to do is we need to enhance the operational competencies of our students, our educational institutions.
So basically, you're saying that this is anyway happening already.
Right.
And now it is up to us to sort of accommodate or redraft or reframe our approach.
No, I have one small point here. I think he cut the 3 points, and I also think this is what we need to do. But to create critical reasoning skills, and I think we discussed it over lunch also, it has to come from an earlier age. We cannot jump in and do this when you suddenly enter the higher education system. And the second biggest challenge, when you have teachers in the audience, personally I come from a family of teachers, and I think teachers shape the whole, the society is shaped by those who teach. So we not only have to enter this spirit of critical thinking, reasoning, and make it more important than rote learning, which we have put in the NEP. I keep seeing it in the NEP as we have to do it. But to implement it, the teachers group has to be almost retrained, not only the students. And I think they are doing it, but it is just that cycle of making it happen. And I would like Professor Kumar's point on this.
Once this one part is the schools need to do it.
No, not even schools, even in colleges.
The other part is how does government and the political class approach this from your experience with them?
This is what I'm saying. That's exactly what I'm saying. I think nobody will disagree with all the 3 points that he mentioned. But how does one now make this? The NEP is there, even I'm not talking state center politics now. Nobody can dispute the kind of points he makes of the importance of changing our thing from rote learning to critical thinking to communication skills, which you were mentioning. But we are constrained by an exam system which is age old, and to shift that, though we are working in that direction, it's going to take time. Now, I think the more important thing for government to focus is, if we are taking those steps, then the teacher education and the way we evaluate students has to change. I also like this point about current day skills becoming irrelevant and our need to upgrade skills. And what he mentioned about entry and exit, it's also important that we keep giving higher education opportunities for people to keep learning. Now, whether we use YouTube or other things, that's fine.
Learning, relearning, basically.
Because today's 25-year-old or 30-year-old has just entered the job market. 3 years from now, he may become redundant or irrelevant. What should we do as policymakers to keep giving these people? They were good in their own time. But today's time, they are, as he rightly said, becoming we don't need those skills any longer. But he needs to have an easy, because this person is working now. He has a family. He cannot drop it all and go study.
Yeah.
So how do we make this part of and he rightly said that tomorrow's world is going to be controlled by people who have this power. So we need to make this happen. That's what that would be a priority.
So here's the challenging part, Dr. Jagadesh Kumar. Do we enable the schools? Does the school education enable these people to sort of, not just in Chennai, okay, say Kaulakal or some village in Nanilam or wherever, do they equip the children to be aware and to be able to use this new coming tool? Are they able to access this as a supplement or as a thing? The other thing I wanted to know is that there's a lot of buzz about primary school having been enhanced by technology supplement. For instance, I am told that there is a QR code at the end of the chapters which enables students to learn more. There is a QR code for the teachers to sort of look at, and maybe, so I don't know, I'm going to sort of do a straw poll later of the teachers whether these things are being used or are prevalent or not. Is the equipping both sides according?
No, I will take up the last part first.
Huh.
These QR codes are only as a means of guidance.
Correct,
because there
correct.
is so much of information. For a child, it becomes very difficult to search. Therefore, these QR codes are introduced. But now, due to the penetration of the smartphones and also the availability of internet, a lot of usage is happening. The QR code usage and then accessing this information. But beyond that, the mode in which we are providing education today will completely disappear in the coming years, because most of learning will happen at a personal level. Personal learning will happen using technology. And
I just want to intervene. Just like work from home, you think study from home is a possibility?
in fact, study from anywhere will become the norm in future, except for those components where real life experience is required. You'll have to come to the lab, do the surgery, or do the welding. But the other part of the learning will happen in diversified modes at different times and spaces. What we need to do, therefore, is we need to move away from just being degree factories. We need to provide our students with competencies with evidence. For example, if you are an employer, if I come to you and say, I have studied AI and these are my top grades, and another student comes and he says that, no, I have built this, I have tested this, I have failed twice, but I have improved and this is my evidence, you will pick me up. So it is that kind of experiential learning integrated with personalized education is what will happen in the coming years. But more importantly, we must also remember that our educational institutions are social institutions. They have a social commitment to fulfill by providing high quality education to students on a mass scale. Then what will happen? When you provide high quality education on a mass scale, the average competency levels in the society will be enhanced, and then the average productivity levels will go up, our economy will become stronger, and you can then put more money, more funds into public education. So it's a positive cycle, and that is going to happen in the coming years.
Let me take this to Girija 1 second.
I wanted to jump in because he's definitely the expert here on higher education. As I said, my experience in higher education is very limited, but on school education, where I definitely have done a lot more work, I tend to agree with him, but I think the role of the teacher and the facilitator at the lower level is extremely important. There we cannot, unless we strengthen the ability at that level, then what he says will happen. Suppose if you take the Western system, there's no way we can do away with teachers there. The teacher education, the importance. See, today government schools are not attracting people. The private schooling system is, and this is a whole cycle of like he said, a virtuous cycle. We are having a non-virtuous cycle there where children are going to private schools and where the importance is not given to any of the value education that we want. Somewhere we have to break that cycle. I'm not going to the contentious area of learning in the mother tongue, but I am saying that fundamentally we have to move to a very strong primary education system where the teacher and the community play a very big part. Then by the time the children reach high school, I think what you're talking about, it can become very, very possible. We can't let them free and allowed to learn when they're younger. I think we have to do a lot of work on strengthening the primary school system.
So you had very kindly mentioned education institutions as social institutions. But when we move out of school or even in school, I mean, at least there is another perspective about the education system is that education institutions are also political enterprises. So at the intersection that this is, how much resistance do you see in implementing things like the NEP, in implementing new ideas, or even the approach? I mean, we discussed, why aren't Indian business schools teaching, say, the story of Amul or of Nirma or of the groups that created Calvin, the sachet marketing idea? Why is that not a case study in the Indian schools? So is also now we are talking a lot about foreign investment in education, collaboration with institutions. We are trying to bring the campus here when the story is changing there for them. So is the ownership of the education institution a plus or a minus or a deterrent to reforms in the sector?
Very briefly, I want to answer. See, at the end, we are all Indians. We want to make our country great. Your question of whether some of these policies are implemented or not, we all understand the challenges that we need to overcome. There could be, in some places, there could be some points of differences. But as a country, every state, you may call by SEP, you may call by NEP, we are all wedded to the objective of making our country great. And we implement many of these reforms to strengthen our educational system. So I have absolutely no doubt about that. And about the educational institutions, as I said, that it's essential, considering the fact that a large number of our students come from rural background and socially and economically weaker backgrounds. Education should become accessible. Education can never be commercialized. And that's the reason why when the parliament is discussing, is going to discuss the Vikasit Bharat Shiksha Adhishtan bill to come up with an integrated regulatory system in our country, where state representation will be there, state university representation will be there, so that we can formulate collectively policies for the entire country. This is one of the major objectives, that all educational institutions have to mandatorily put out information, audited information on their finances and revenue, so that the public can actually check what are the means they are using to raise this revenue, whether this revenue is used to build better systems for the benefit of the students. So things have to be made transparent. Our educational institutions have to be made accountable. Ultimately, we need to protect the interests of the students. We need to make sure that there is transparency in our educational system. We need to build public trust in the institutions. And I'm sure all the states, whether it's at the central government or in the state governments, all of us are working towards this objective.
Okay, I wanted to sort of, I know time's up,
Yeah.
I'm being told. Just the last question.
Yeah.
Is there sufficient appreciation within the governments and among politicians
Yeah.
of how critical this transition is going to be, or
I can only speak for our state. Our state has always put a high value, irrespective of the government, on higher education. And I will talk about our reservation policy. And one of the reasons why we are where we are today is the fact that we overgrew in, I think his point was right, whether it's private sector or public sector, we always saw the value in making education. It might be at a cost, but making education available to our people, higher education available to our people. We might have overdone it, whether it is engineering education or dental education. Sometimes we have overdone it a bit, but other than that, the state has always across political lines has seen the value of higher education. I do not see this state with a, but I am hoping that this is slowly spreading. I'm sure Andhra also has had a very great history of this. Now, whether these are delivering the kind of education that he's talking about, or they are doing something for their own commercial sustenance, I'm not able to say. But I think politically, the value of giving higher education, and socially, the value of using education as the only way to go up from one state to the other is well understood in our state. And I can definitely attest to that.
On that positive note and the demonstration effect of southern states, I shall conclude this. Have I done good time?